Hey everyone, welcome to Keeping Organized as You Search. We'll have time for the questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to post questions in the chat as well. So we're starting out with an activity on how you organize your research right now, just to get an idea of where you're coming from. So feel free to keep adding those in. We've put the Jamboard link in the chat and I will add it here as well. Okay, so you should be able to see the slides now. Do those look all right? So I'm Joanna Namath, and I am the Instruction and Reference Librarian here at Athabasca University Library, and I'll let Robin and Sarah Jean introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Robin Stobbs. I'm the Research Data Management Librarian at AU Library.
And hi everybody, I'm Sarah Jean Watt, the Right Site Coordinator. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Awesome. All right, so today we're going to be covering time management and assignment calculators, search journals in Word and Excel, and setting search histories and alerts, organizing your research, including file organization, folder naming, folder organization, note-taking, research planning, and mind mapping, and where to go for help. And Sarah Jean will start us off with time management.
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, I'd like to share some tools and strategies for planning your time during research and writing. So assignment calculators can give you a plan or schedule of the research and writing process broken down into steps, and each step will have its own due date. So all you have to do is go to these sites that have the assignment calculators and enter your start date and your end date. Your start date doesn't have to be today, it can be in the future. Right now, maybe you're just planning your time. And similarly, the end date doesn't need to be the actual due date. If you have an actual due date, ideally it should actually be earlier to allow yourself extra time, especially if you want to submit your draft to the right site. In that case, leave 3 business days to receive feedback from your writing coach. And I'll talk more about the right site at the end of the webinar. I'd like to talk to you about a couple different assignment calculators you can try. The links to these are on our handout. The first one, an assignment calculator from Simon Fraser University, will break down the steps for you into recommended percentages, identifying the day you should begin each step. For example, 20% for research, 10% for outlining, 20% for drafting, 25% for revising. So this SFU version also allows you to import the first day of each step to your Outlook calendar. And the instructions of how to do that are on our handout. So be sure if you use that to interpret each calendar event it enters as the day you begin the step. You might actually want to manually change that event to recur each day until the next step begins. You could even schedule in break days. The U of Toronto calculator is interesting and very helpful because it allows you to choose between several different types of assignments. These include literature review, as well as annotated bibliography, presentation, and even graduate school application. Similar to the first one, you'll receive recommended steps, but different types of assignments have slightly different writing processes with different sets of steps. So this assignment calculator not only gives you a recommended timeline, it also gives a guideline for how to approach the particular type of assignment. So with the U of T calculator, you can also generate a PDF that provides the steps, dates, and so on. Personally, I tried it and I didn't find the PDF overly useful. I found it more useful to manually put the dates into my Outlook calendar. And so speaking of a calendar, if you're very visual or tactile, you may also want to print a blank monthly calendar and write down which step of your assignment that you should be working on each day. Excel has a template for this. The template you see here is called blank monthly calendar in Excel, blank monthly calendar, and instructions for how to find it are on our handout. Alternatively, you can print your calendar from Outlook with a specified date range and 1 month per page. Instructions to do this are also found on our handout. And there are even assignment calculators specifically for the graduate thesis and dissertation. The University of British Columbia's thesis calculator allows you to choose master's or PhD to get tailored results. So with this one, the steps are broken down by semester of your program. Detailed steps are given not only for writing, but also suggested professional development and even self-care. This time you can sign up for email reminders, which could be useful if you're more apt to check your email than your calendar. A downside, though, is that it is very geared toward UBC students, and many links or suggested steps are relevant only to them. So you might want to try the University of Minnesota's dissertation calculator, as it gives very detailed strategies for each step. The steps identified include developing research methodology, reviewing the literature, analyzing data, and writing. Like the SFU calculator that we discussed at the beginning, each step is broken down by percentage time to spend, accompanied by a due date for each step. And just remember with all of these that these are just guidelines. You don't have to follow it to the letter. It's just there to give you a plan. For these longer projects, like a thesis, like a dissertation, or even just a very long paper, I suggest creating a blank calendar in Outlook devoted completely to that one project. This is a good idea to help keep you focused on the various steps of one project at a time. So the assignment calculator will suggest the time periods for each step, then you can put them into Outlook, signed in with your AU email address. Here you can see I created a calendar with different steps from the U Minnesota dissertation calculator. I color-coded each step so that I can quickly see where one ends and another begins. The handout contains instructions for how to create and print a yearly calendar. You can print a hard copy or print to PDF to have a digital copy. Okay, here's a quick challenge to sum up our discussion of time management. What is the benefit of using an assignment calculator? You can put your answer in the chat. Is it A, break the writing process into steps? B, give you a schedule to input in your calendar? C, manage your time while writing? Or D, all of the above? It looks like most of you jumped in already before I finished reading and knew that it was all of these. You can break the writing process into steps, get a schedule to input into your calendar, and manage your time while writing. I hope that you'll find those useful tools to help in your various writing projects. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Looks good.
All right, so let's talk about search journals. And thanks for explaining all of that, Sarah Jean. So as you search, it's very helpful to keep a document or a search journal of the terms you've used, how you found the results, and notable articles and citations that you want to revisit. I'll go over using a Word document and an Excel template that we've created. So here's an example in Word. I like using it for journaling my search because it's quick and easy. You don't have to learn anything new. And yeah, here is an example. So the main document, you can see here that we can keep track of the main information, the topic, the databases searched. So in this case, I think we've only got CINAHL in here. The searches we've tried so far and the results that we came up with in those, and relevant articles found in our results. For articles, we recommend copying the whole citation so you have all the information you need to find it. In the case of the second article here, you can see we added in the abstract. That's because the title, Scholars in Solitude, isn't super descriptive. So having something to remind us why it's useful to us is a good idea. You could also put your own notes in of what you think is relevant about the article. Yes, the presentation is being recorded. If you scroll up in the chat, you can see that there is a link to our YouTube channel that it will be posted on, probably not until tomorrow. Okay, so looking closer, I identify where, when, and what I've searched and what's missing. Correctly formatting citations can come later. I've highlighted this as a note to indicate that it still needs to be correctly formulated. All right, so you'll do lots of searching. And you'll need to journal your searches, read the abstracts and full articles, and make sure search notes on individual resources, and then make a short list of selected resources for your current assignment. So as we've said, there are many ways to consider journaling. This journal has been created using Excel. So here's a template of how you can think about journaling your search in Excel. So you can copy this into Numbers, Google Sheets, however you like. So I'm just going to share the template with you here. It's also in the handout that we shared earlier in the presentation. So the researcher here first identifies their research topic, hand hygiene in hospital workers, and has separated out their 3 or 4, in this case, main topics. So you can see all their concepts here. And then they consider ways to combine their searches using ands and ors. If you need help thinking about your search process, take a look at our Boolean search guide here. They then document the databases used and the results found. You can also make comments over here about the relative merits of your search. Did you find too many items? Not enough? This is a more general way to keep track of your searches. You'll also want to create a document to make notes on individual articles themselves. So in regards to search history and alerts, various databases allow you to find your search history and some allow for alerts to be set. Many of these require creating a personal account with a vendor that's run, such as EBSCO or ProQuest. So it's kind of outside the library, but it's still something you can set up through our databases. So here's an example of finding the search history. This is in EBSCO, and it's just right underneath your search box there. So if we take a look at the search history, this is a little blurry, but you can see we've got, I think that's quite a few different searches, and you can see on the right, you've got the different limiters you used, various different keywords you used, and you can copy those right into a document for yourself. You can also set up search alerts, which is really useful. So from here, you can select email alert and you'll get an alert. So if you're looking for a really specific topic or you want to be alerted when something new is published on that topic, that's where that's really useful. I like using Google Scholar for this because they cover a lot more articles than any of the other vendors because they kind of do everything. So it can be great, but of course you're more limited with your search strings there. And Robin's going to talk to us about organizing our research now.
Thanks, Joanna. So in regards to organizing your research, I'm going to talk a bit about citation management software, and then Joanna will speak to folders and file naming. We're going to put a link in the chat to our library guide on citation management, and we will be having an in-depth citation management session. So be sure to tune in on November 30th, and Joanna's going to put the link to that session in the chat as well. So citation management software allows you to save and organize literature as you are searching. It can also be used to help you cite as you write and to generate bibliographies. There are entire recorded webinars available and that live session coming up later this month. So I'm just going to focus in on citation management as it relates to keeping you organized. If you have any questions about using the tools or want to learn more about how they can help you cite as you write or generate bibliographies, please don't hesitate to reach out to the library. So on this slide, there's an article I found when I did a search for research data management. In the top right of my browser, indicated by the red arrow, I can click the MyZotero add-on to save the article, and then a window comes up, which is where the second arrow is pointing to, that tells me where in Zotero the item is being saved to. And if you can click, Joanna, to have that window show, thank you. It's then saved into my Zotero library. You can see that it saved a record of the item, a PDF copy, and a snapshot of the ScienceDirect website where I got the article from. And if you click again, please, Joanna. There we go. You can see the Notes tab used to add notes on the item. For example, notes on where you got it from, or if you use a search journal like Joanna suggested, you can add a note connecting to that journal. I'll also note here that if you are using items like print books, you can manually add a record so that you don't lose track of them either. Should take us to the next slide. One more click, please. So now I can organize items I have saved. On screen here is an example of articles and chapters sorted by course they were collected for with subfolders for assignments. So you can see that HeCall 565 was the course, and I have a separate folder for assignment 2 and for the final assignment in that course. I can also tag resources I've saved in order to make them easier to find. So that's on the next slide. There we go. And you see in that box in the bottom left corner. So once I've tagged, you can click on any tag and then only items in your current folder that have been assigned that tag will be displayed. So if you click, Joanna, there should be another box that comes up on the slide. Perfect. So I like to keep a running list of tags I have created and what types of items they are assigned to. The example on the screen is an Excel sheet of tags from the beginning of a project I'm doing on research data management. As I read more articles, I will add more tags into my list, and that just helps me keep track of how I've been tagging things within my system. So items in your library don't only have to be in one folder. Pictured on screen here is an article on curation of qualitative research and developing curriculum for teaching curation. I placed the article in 2 different folders, data curation and education materials. This doesn't create extra copies of the item. It only exists in my Zotero library once, but it can be added to as many folders and subfolders as I like by dragging and dropping. This allows me to organize papers by course or assignment as well as by topic without having to save duplicate copies into different folders. So now, if you don't want to use citation management software, you can create a naming system for folders on your computer. You should be consistent in how you name folders and files within them and document those naming conventions. This can be as simple as creating a plain text README file to include in the top level folder that explains how you named them and how you organize them. If you want to include items in more than one folder, you can create a shortcut in Windows or what's called an alias on a Mac. Links to instructions on how to do both of those things are included in the handout, and there's also a link to a handout to help you develop file naming conventions within our handout there as well. Joanna is now going to talk to us about naming conventions for folders and documents.
All right, perfect. I was just, I figured it would be good to reshare the YouTube channel that our recording will be on and also our handout for anyone who missed it earlier on in the presentation. Thanks so much for covering that, Robin. So it's good to think about what files you keep on your computer and how you can organize them. This can be outside of your own education as well. For instance, personal, maybe you have information about your kids on there, education, work, medical, taxes. For school, I like to organize mine by semester and then by course within that semester. And I know some people put that in the Jamboard as well as something they like to do as well. So that it really depends on how you think about your research and how you organize it in your own head of what makes the most sense to you. But this is kind of an example. So we've got courses, the folder for fall 2022, which courses, and then all the information about those courses that I have in those files, well named, and we'll get into naming a little bit later on. So as I was saying, while folder naming is important, if your files don't have helpful names within those folders, it's going to be even harder to find what you're looking for. So in regards to file names, use descriptive names, authors' names, and a word that describes what it's about or why it's relevant. Use consistent formats like year, month, day, just the year in terms of dates. Avoid unusual characters like slashes and ampersands. Do not use spaces to separate. Use underscores or differentiate words with capitals instead. Keep names as short as possible and avoid repetition and be consistent. All right, so I have some examples of ineffective file names here. I'm sure you've all had some various issues with some of these file names in the past. So in the chat, how would you rename these? There's no right answer. It's just good to see different ideas of how to rename these, and then we'll go through some of our ideas. Or if no one wants to participate, I can just go through my the examples.
I usually include a date with when I have like multiple files, or actually just generally like a date, and also a different title so I don't have multiples of the same one.
Okay, yeah, instead of drafts.
Yeah.
And draft. Yeah. Sounds good. That's a good way to go about it. All right, so these are some examples or some ways we came up with, different ways to go about naming these. So with the English paper, we're going to remind ourselves of the topic of the paper in the file name and that there are two different versions. That's always very confusing. In our Johnson notes, that doesn't tell us which of the two articles the notes discuss. And 1 and 2 is also going to be hard to remember. So putting in edu theory and edu practice and that the notes are for the edu theory paper makes sense. And you'll likely have lots of nursing theory articles in your nursing theory course. So it might be good to add in the author and the year. And now Sarah Jean will talk to us about note-taking.
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, so the effective note-taking strategies that I'll discuss include reading actively, using templates to take your notes and engage with the material, and Robin will also weigh in here, and knowing when to quote, paraphrase, or summarize. So now we're kind of getting into, you know, the more nitty-gritty, we're getting closer to the writing process. So when preparing to take notes effectively, it's important to read actively for understanding. Reading actively means that you continually think critically about what you're reading, reflect on what you've read, and think about questions that you have about your source. When working with journal articles, start by reading the abstract, like Joanna mentioned earlier, and this way you can determine if the article may be useful. At the same time, determine the article's conclusions from the abstract, if you can, before you read the article. This will help with understanding. You can then scan the article, reading the headings to determine relevance and to preview the article's main points. At the same time, you can try to scan for keywords that relate to your topic. And when reading books, use the table of contents, headings, and index to help you find relevant material. The introduction and conclusion or discussion sections can also be useful portions of articles, especially to read and reread to gain understanding. Now you should also periodically take breaks and summarize in your own words what you've just read to be sure that you understand it. So if you find yourself talking out loud to the source, you're doing it right. Once you're done reading, spend a few minutes explaining the main points to an online study buddy, a spouse, a friend, a colleague. This will force you to put the ideas in your own words, ensure your understanding, and prepare you for taking more in-depth notes. Finally, part of active reading is engaging physically with the text. You can start out by highlighting, underlining, circling to identify main points and key words or phrases. Write your questions, thoughts, and observations in the margins. If you find your brain doing word association with outside concepts or related words jumping into your head, you can note those in the margins as well. If there's a visual way you can present some of the information to help yourself summarize it or boil it down, then do that. So for example, you might put a flow chart of related ideas on a page, and you can then attach that to the article. You could also make a diagram of a particular concept that you want to remember, or even create a doodle that represents some important information. By doing any of these things, you're interacting with the source physically, which helps with comprehension and engagement. And you can engage physically with the text even if you don't print it by using a PDF reader's highlighting and commenting functions. So in this example, I used the browser, Microsoft Edge. You can also use Adobe. Microsoft Edge is also a great free option. You can highlight in multiple colors, you can draw, and you can add typed text. So if you want to open a PDF in Edge, right-click on the PDF file in your folder system, choose Open With on the menu that opens, and then Open with Edge. Edge should open with the annotation tools in a bar at the top of the screen, as you can see here, that black bar. Be sure to save it to keep the annotations. You need to save the file in order to have the the highlighting and your notes saved on that file. And here's an example of a mind map or a relation map from HEART. You can do this through any approach that works for you for a single article, but you may find it even more useful for exploring the ideas you gleaned from multiple articles. And we'll see another way to deal with information from multiple sources a little later on. But I did want to show you that when working with an article to understand its contents, you don't have to treat the information in a linear fashion. Playing with it in a visual fashion can help you engage with it and thus understand it more comprehensively.
Oh, and Sarah Jean, there's a question in the chat that might be relevant for you to respond to.
Let's see. So Cheyenne asked, would you recommend highlighting the PDF directly or using a reference manager like Mendeley's highlight annotation tools? And Robin said you can do either. Robin likes to highlight the text outside of the reference manager because the PDF reader gives more options for color. So maybe eventually the reference manager will come out with more colors as well. Can save a step.
Yes, and I'll note that the reference manager I use is Zotero, so it doesn't have very many colors. I haven't used Mendeley. It might have more, but that was my key reason is I have a lot of different colors I like to use. So that's how I judge which PDF reader to use.
I love that. So Robin's going to be talking to us right here about using templates to take your notes. All of the following templates can be accessed through links on our handout. This first template you might find useful to guiding your reading of an article.
Thanks, Sarah Jean. So this particular template is geared towards in-depth reading of an item. You don't necessarily have to use all of the sections. Think about what's most relevant to you in your current project. And as Sarah Jean noted, an empty copy is linked into the handout. So I'm just going to go over each heading on this particular template. So tags match the tags in my citation management system that I already went over. I like to assign my own tags, but you can also look at keywords assigned to an article. They're usually listed underneath the abstract. In the quick description section, I usually put 1 to 2 sentences of what the article is about. In the key takeaways section, I put 1 to 2 key points for me and what I'm working on. I fill that in at the end after I've read the article or chapter. In the terms section, I put any key terms defined in the article. And in the important points section, I put the author's key points, which may not be my own key takeaways for my project. So in this section, I tend to summarize as I read and then pull the most important pieces to leave here. In the methods section, if it's a research article, I note how the research was designed, whether it was an experiment, surveys, interviews, etc. And then in the other of interest section, I put any other points, critiques, or interesting connections I make as I read. And some of these may end up going into the key takeaways or into the follow-up section when I'm done reading. I have a 4AU section because for my current project, I need to relate what I'm reading to services we're offering through the library at Athabasca University. You might want to have a section for your particular assignment or course. And sometimes I take what goes in here and summarize it up into the key takeaways section. The follow-up section is for references or concepts I want to look up. So sometimes if you have a really key article, you may have a long list of all the things they've cited that you now want to go and find. Now back to Sarah Jean.
Thanks so much for that overview, Robin. I just want to point out that there's something I really like about Robin's template, which is putting the key takeaway near the top, even though it isn't determined until after you read the article. So again, you're not going to necessarily fill this out in a completely linear fashion. Putting the key takeaway near the top emphasizes it. It's kind of like your thesis statement in the paper. You're not going to necessarily know it right away. You might write your body and it develops from maybe a draft idea or thesis as you write and as you revise. then you go back, you put it at the top to emphasize it for your reader. So I really like that part about your template, Robin. This is another template to give you an idea of how to take detailed notes when gathering evidence, data, or quotes that you'll want to discuss in your paper. So this will consist of paraphrases and quotes in addition to the summarizing you did on the earlier template. Summarizing occurs in the columns focused on the article's main idea and main points. Then, paraphrases and quotes may include evidence, findings, data, particular statements of analysis or discussion, and memorable wording or definitions. And you should also include a comment section for your own thoughts and questions. I'd further recommend differentiating the types of notes with a key that identifies the different fonts used. You can see this in the upper left-hand corner of the slide. For example, you can use italics to identify paraphrases, quotation marks, of course, to identify direct quotes, and maybe bold for your own comments. This comparison template adapted from HART is designed for multiple sources at once, which is particularly useful for literature reviews and in-depth research papers. It allows you to group sources by topic and explore their similarities and differences. This, in turn, gives you a way to structure your paper or review by topic. You start with the template by choosing the topic and entering a key concept, word, or phrase, and then put the author and date of a particular source that's relevant to the topic at the top of each column. You can complete this table for each key concept or topic. It's okay to use the same source on multiple tables, as it may be relevant to multiple topics. You can also change the category names in that first column as suits your own research. Just like Robin showed on her template, include the headings that are useful to you. This is really just to give you a starting place, all of these, adapt them and make them work for you. From there, just fill out each column for the source listed at the top. And that's it. You're on your way to better understanding the relationship between the sources, as well as organizing your paper. To keep your notes organized and effective, it's important to know when to quote versus when to paraphrase. Your writing should be made up of mostly paraphrases because it's your writing. It should be mostly your words. But there are certain times when quoting, which is using someone else's exact words, can be useful. So you can use quotes where wording is very memorable or important. The author's words should be unique and unusual and get their point across concisely. Quoting might be useful when defining a term as well, because the wording can't easily be changed without altering the meaning. It's also pertinent to quote when you wish to respond to or critique someone else's exact words. So that's common when you're doing a close reading of literature or engaging in a critical debate in your field. So try to minimize the use of quotes. And when you do quote, choose the part of the quote that's most relevant to you. It could even be just a word or two, a short phrase. A short quote can be embedded within a sentence in which you do most of the talking, and just paraphrase the rest of the idea or analyze the short phrase in that sentence. So as we saw in the second template used for gathering evidence, be sure to summarize the main idea and main supporting points, paraphrase specific statements or passages, and then optionally pair the notes with a short quote that captures its essence. So we want to see mostly summarizing and paraphrasing and maybe a few short quotes. When you do quote, ensure that you record the page number as well, and always put your quotes in those double quotation marks I mentioned to signal that they're the exact words of the source's author. It's also important to note that a quote or any piece of evidence never speaks for itself. It's up to you to explain the quote in the context of your own paper. So therefore, find a way on your notes template to include an area for your own thoughts or analysis. We had this on both of the first two templates. As a writer, you've chosen the quote for a reason. You might want to record that reason when you record the quote, why it's important to your paper, so that you remember how you wanted to use the quote. It's also important to take the time to paraphrase and summarize effectively when taking notes. This will help to capture a clear and complete understanding so that you remember when you return to your notes later. The main difference between a paraphrase and a summary is that a paraphrase is of a specific wording or passage, maybe a sentence or two, up to a short paragraph, while a summary is to identify and record the main idea or thesis or the main points to support the thesis of a source. When you paraphrase, you might use a signal phrase like Baldwin states. When you summarize, you might use a more general signal phrase like Baldwin argues. Like quoting, you'll actually only paraphrase when you want to record the meaning of a specific portion or passage of the source, a specific statement. So you might say Baldwin states. When you're working with several sources, much of the work you do to collect your notes will be summarizing. It's essential to record the main idea or argument of each source you read, that key takeaway, so that you document the context of your other notes. Main points, which are pieces of support for the argument, are also important to allow you to follow the logic of the author's argument or findings when you come back to your notes later. You can also summarize specific passages by stating the idea of the passage in much fewer words. Paraphrases come in with specific details like pieces of evidence, findings, data, and the author's analysis or discussion. Again, always record the page number of a paraphrase so you can find it later. You might not need it in your citation if you're using APA, but you do need the page number if you want to find the paraphrase again later. The same can be said for summary if you're summarizing a particular portion of the text. So paraphrasing and summarizing vastly improve the flow of your writing. It can be very awkward to just put quote after quote with very few of your own words. Paraphrasing and summarizing allow you to transition smoothly without the choppiness of overquoting. And my most crucial suggestion for paraphrasing and summarizing effectively is to do so without looking at the original source. This will help you avoid using the exact wording of the original author. So after actively reading, you should synthesize the idea or passage in your own mind before recording it, before writing it down. Think about it and be sure you understand it. Once you've done that, put the original text away. We don't want to look at it. And write a draft of your paraphrase in your own words, according to your own understanding. Then you can check your paraphrase against the original source to ensure that it's sufficiently different from the original and of course accurate. At that point, ensure the wording and sentence structure are both different to have an effective paraphrase, because if you've used a lot of the same wording, you might be coming close to accidental plagiarism. Then you can revise those areas to complete your own wording. So remember that the most effective way to gather evidence will summarize the main ideas and main points, pair those with paraphrases of the most important details, with a few memorable quotes sprinkled in. Okay, so to review, here are a few true and false questions. You can pop your answer in the chat. So first is engaging physically with a source is an example of active reading. Is that true or false? You can just put T or F in the chat. Well, we're getting some debate on this one. So again, it's engaging physically with a source is an example of active reading. Well, this is one of the parts of active reading. It's one of the ways that you can approach active reading, by highlighting, by underlining, by circling, by writing notes, annotating the text like we showed on that slide with the highlighted sentences. So I would say this is true. It's an example of active reading because it can help you to engage with the text and start to understand it. Let's try the next one. Note-taking templates can help you record key details and compare sources. Would that be true or false? Did you say T or F for that one? Getting some truths, and I agree with that. That's the purpose of a note-taking template. What about you might choose to quote if the wording is unique and concise? Would that be true or false? Okay, getting some truths. Thanks so much for participating. Yes, remember to quote sparingly. And one of the times you may want to quote is if the wording is very unique or concise. How about you should draft your paraphrase with the original source in front of you? Would this be true or false? Seeing some falses pop up, and you would be correct. We actually want to put that original source away, not be tempted to pull that exact wording into our paraphrase and have that unintentional plagiarism that can happen. Oh, I like the little GIF here. Thanks, Mohammed. All right, I'll turn it back over to Joanna now. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, that was a hot debate. Good job, everyone participating. And great section, Sarah Jean. It's always so tricky to figure out all of the quoting and paraphrasing parts. So it's nice to have some really useful information on that. I wish I'd had that during my undergrad. So this is the last section, and we're going to talk about research planning. The first thing you'll want to do is to pose your topic as a question. As you read, think about your stance on the topic or the angle at which you would like to examine it. You will, of course, need to narrow these ideas down to a focused thesis topic as you continue to gather evidence for your research. As you proceed to develop a thesis, think about the resources you need. You might need books, journal articles, theses, dissertations, maybe newspaper articles, maybe you need some primary sources, and where you might go about finding those resources. Doing some pre-reading before you start digging into in-depth research can really help you get a handle on what you'll be looking for. As you do pre-reading, it can help to make a mind map of your ideas. So I help with research with anyone that's just having trouble finding their research topics, and often they'll come to me with the super broad topic that was assigned, like they have to write a paper on women in ancient Greece. And so then we need to think about paring that down to like, maybe we want to look at feminism or work or the day-to-day lives, motherhood, relationships, how they're depicted in art. And potentially we want to look at a particular region instead of looking at all of Greece, because depending on the time period, that could be a large amount of space. So here's an example of a mind map. I'll get into some real ones, but this can just kind of get you started. So you start with the main idea in the middle here, the dark blue idea, and then we brainstorm related ideas. You don't have to use a mind map, but it's just a good example of how to go about using this. So then you can refine your mind map into the areas that you really want to focus on for your topic. So for our example, we're looking at our central topic, which is what impact does research time have on cognitive function? And you can see we've got different branches of all the different topic areas we could look at within this, but this probably isn't going to be one succinct paper. This is just kind of a brainstorming of everything that can come up. So we've got different types of young people, older people, screen time, cognitive processes. So we might decide to focus on how video games affect the memory and reading comprehension of school children. So we chose to go with young people, we chose to go with video games, and reading comprehension. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can keep focused and develop some focus in your search. So we're down to our conclusion. So first we want to ask what you're going to take away from this session. We've got a Padlet here. So since I have my screen shared, I might be able to show it. All right, I cleared out the one we'd done last time and there were some really good ones in here. So all you have to do is use this plus sign over here and just add what you're going to use from the session we did today. It's just useful to see. And while you're doing that, I suppose we can probably continue on with our concluding remarks. Continue on and tell you our closing remarks. So we'll give you a little bit more information on that the library offers. We have webinars and tutorials that will help you with your research process. We also offer assistance with search strategies, access to materials, and we can help you with any technical difficulties you're having in regards to library research. And Robin will talk to you about RDM support.
Thanks, Joanna. So if you're working on a project that requires you to collect data, for example, if you're interviewing participants, working with archival materials, designing an experiment, or sourcing statistics and data sets from other researchers or Statistics Canada, or if you have data you want to share with others, the library offers support and resources for managing and sharing that data as well. You can book individual appointments for assistance or review the resources we have put together and linked in your handout. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions.
Yeah, and the Write site offers writing support in many ways. You can get one-on-one support in two ways. One is through the Writing Dropbox, and one is through real-time appointments. And I'll give you those links in just a minute. The Writing Dropbox allows you to submit a draft of your assignment and get written feedback from a writing coach. Or you can book a real-time appointment to have a video chat appointment within 3 business days. And we also have community spaces like the Writing Forum, which takes place every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. Mountain. It could be a good lunch break thing for you to come to. It's just an informal gathering of students and writing coaches. It gives you a place to ask questions about writing or share your experiences with writing. It's really quite fun and relaxed, and you can learn a lot even just by listening. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, you don't have to. I really encourage you all to come out. So again, that's on Tuesdays at 12:30 Mountain Time. And another thing I'll just mention is when you visit our website, you'll also find many other resources under our menu. So when you go to the website, just click there's 3 lines on the left-hand side at the top, and that's where you'll find our menu and lots of links to different writing resources on the writing process, grammar, and academic writing, as well as documentation. So please use our resources. Please use the libraries, LibGuides, tutorials. There's lots of rich information out there for you to benefit from.
Thank you. As I said, we've created a handout that has links to everything we've discussed, as well as kind of point form of a lot of the important points. In terms of looking for academic journals, I'm maybe just going to stop sharing this because it doesn't seem to be working. But in terms of looking for journals, are you looking for a particular journal that you need a PDF of, or are you looking to find articles on your topic? Because if you're looking you have a journal title, you have the whole citation, you just need to find it. Here are the step-by-step instructions. Otherwise, I would recommend taking a look at our Search Like a Pro guide, which goes through all the steps of developing your search process. So I'll just open that up here. It's also linked in the handout.
Yeah, if some of this is unfamiliar to you still, you might just have to click on the different links and try a few things out to see what will be most helpful. You're sure to learn something from all these different resources. So give it a try. And even just by doing that, say if you're a new student, you're just exposing yourself to the different parts of the academic world, so to speak, by checking out the different parts of the library, the different parts of the Writing Center. So I'm really glad that you all came today, and remember that you can book an appointment with one of us to get help and support, and we're here to help.
Yeah, we respond to emails and phone calls all the time during office hours, so you can contact us and then we can get you in touch with whatever you need help with. So I'll just add our library contact information. It's in the handout as well. And I'll share the handout one more time. I'm glad that was helpful for everyone. And hopefully we'll see you again, and maybe at the reference management session in 2 weeks. And Sarah Jean, I had seen your writing forum information on the on our, I think somewhere within our communications, and it sounds really cool. So I'm glad I got to hear more about it.
Thanks. That's great, Joanna. I'm glad that the word is getting out there.
And I will stop recording. So there should be a recording that will